I'm going to be upgrading the brakes on the GT40, so I thought I'd walk you through the procedure here, see if it helps you if you're looking at doing something similar. We're going to take this and make it look like this. Now you might be thinking, you said GT40, but there's something about Mustang II spindles. So I built this car and another race car using Mustang II front spindles because there's a lot of different options for them. They're readily available and they're pretty darn affordable. And they're a heck of a lot cheaper than using center lock wheels. I mean, you don't have to buy center lock wheels, which cost quite a bit more. So I'm using a 2-inch drop Mustang II spindle. I got this whole setup from Speedway Motors. And this is their bigger brake package. So instead of the, 9 1/4, 9 1/2 inch disc a Mustang II would have had, this has an 11-inch disc and a GM metric style caliper. It's a floating caliper, and honestly, like in an autocross or with the other car, which is lighter, it's plenty of stopping power. I can lock up the front wheels just fine. So why bother upgrading? I took this car to Sonoma, and it was a hot day, and I found I was getting it up to between turn 6 and 7, I was getting up to about 115 and then had to slow down. 7's a sharp hairpin. And I found the more times I did that, the less braking it felt like I had. It felt like I was getting some fade. Now, the obvious solution there is I didn't have, there's scoops in the front of a GT40 for cooling the brakes, and I didn't have those hooked up because normally I just run autocross and it doesn't matter. So after that, I hooked it up, and that should probably be enough. But I always kind of felt like it should have the better brakes. Superformance uses a similar setup. Some of it's a bling factor. And then a lot of it is because a friend of mine went and got Wilwood brake upgrades for his car. And he kept texting me and some other guys about it. And that kind of tipped me over the edge. So, thanks. The Wilwood setup is about twice as much as this setup, which is why I didn't do it in the first place. But from a cost of running perspective, after it's built, the pads aren't any more expensive. It's not much more if you have to buy, a new rotor or something like that. So in the long run, it's still pretty affordable. It's just the upfront cost. On that topic, Wilwood also makes a Mustang II style spindle that you can get in different drop heights, including the 2-inch drop height, and it looks really nice. It says it's lighter, it says it's 9 pounds. It's pretty expensive though, and I weighed this spindle and it only weighs 10 pounds, so I opted not to go that route. So this is one half of what you get in the kit. This is one side. You get both sides in a kit. This is the, I believe, Dynalite Pro package for the Mustang II spindle. And it comes with everything you need, except you'll need, obviously, grease for the bearings, brake fluid, and then oddly, it doesn't come with the fitting for the brake lines from the caliper, which, would make sense because they don't know what kind of setup you're using, except that when I went to get the fitting, it seemed like I really only had one option, and it was going to work with what I had anyways, because I'm using AN lines already. But it comes with brake pads. I haven't researched the specs on these pads. That's something else that before you get a whole new brake kit, unless you really are just going for the bling, just experimenting with different brake pads can solve any problems that you have. But what I would say the main reason for this is I took everything off of the other side, the Speedway package, and I weighed it, and it came in at 34.28 pounds. And I weighed all of this, and it came in at 16.5 pounds. And it wasn't greased yet and didn't have any brake fluid in it, but you're still looking at almost half the weight. It's a 16-pound difference. So that's 32 pounds off the front of the car, but 16 pounds each corner of unsprung weight. That's a lot. And in that sense, it's pretty good value. And that's the main reason I want it for the other race car, because the other race car is really light in the front, and it's got a really bad ratio of unsprung weight to sprung weight. The only downside to doing any of these upgrades is it costs money. But so you get rotor, aluminum adapter to go from this to the hub, and this right here is what saves a lot of weight. Is the caliper's aluminum, the middle of the hat is now aluminum, and the hub itself is aluminum. Oh, also the mounting hardware for the caliper is now aluminum. So we'll go through the instructions and install this in the order it says. I've already put the studs in. These come with a dual pattern, so you can do either the Ford 4.5 inch or the Chevy 4 3/4 inch spacing. I've already installed this with red Loctite. A little tip when you're installing these, because you need to torque them to 77 pounds and you don't want to mar the face of this, so it's kind of hard to hold this in a way that you can torque those to that high a torque rating, is put them all in, just hand thread them in with the Loctite, and then put them in your wheel, and then put the lugs on, and you just put them in finger tight. So the wheel is now holding this, and then you can sit on the wheel while you torque it, or hold it with your knee. And I'll demonstrate that with the other parts. And the other nice thing about that is that means you're sure to have these in the right holes if they're already going into your wheels. All right, let's get the old brake off. Okay, we're gonna remove this and this. So it's just a bare spindle. I'm gonna start with getting the brake line off. And getting a brake fluid off of my fingers because it will take the paint off of things. With that out of the way, I'm just gonna take the caliper off with its mounting bracket. But I'm not going to take it all the way off because I want it to hold it so it doesn't just fall when I take the lower one off. All right, so it gets this whole old caliper off, which is a floating style, and this is heavy. This is all iron. Juice. Sometimes, ideally you can just pry it. I don't have much of a lip, so I'm going to use this to start it. And then there's a cotter pin hiding under the grease here. And normally you just straighten them out. Oh, this one's going to work. The other side, the pin decided it would rather break than bend straight. The other thing you can do is it gives you trouble is just cut it and take it out from both sides. Obviously I won't be reusing that one, although this is something that isn't supplied in the kit. You will need your own cotter pins. With that out, I can probably just take this and you're going to need this. This guy comes with your spindle. It does not come with the kit. So we're going to reuse this castle nut. And there's a D-ring washer in here that you might be able to reuse, but the kit comes with one that definitely fits. It says you can reuse the old one, or if it doesn't fit the new dust cap, then to use the one that came with the kit. And I found out mine did not fit under the dust cap, so we won't be needing that again. All right, and with that off, and my fingers kind of greasy, we can take that off, being careful not to damage the spindle, and we're good to go. So with all the old brake hardware removed, we get to start assembling the Wilwood kit. And I'm just going through the directions here. The directions are nice and clear. They give you all the torque specs. I'll try to throw in, it's missing the sizes of tools you'll need. But the first step is to bolt this bracket for the brake caliper on. And it's going to go like that. The long bolt goes up top and is going to go through here. And the shorter bolt is going to go in like that. They want red Loctite on both. You're going to be putting Loctite on just about everything they're giving you here. And the torque spec is 47 pounds. So. Oh, and the directions point out that you want to make sure this sits nice and flush and even bolted up before you put the Loctite on and make sure everything's good in case you have to, you know, grind off any rough surfaces on the spindle. But I've already checked mine, they're good. So I'm just going to get these started. So you can see more red Loctite. Just using an extension on a socket to kind of be a nut driver to get these started. And these bolts are a little coarse. I don't mean the threads, I mean the kind of surface finish. So they don't thread in super well, by hand anyways. But using a ratchet, you can tell you're not cross-threaded or anything, they're just a little rough. Okay, I like to get them kind of both firm so I'm sure they're lined up, you know, snug, before I torque them down. That one's nice and firm, so I have this set to 47. Yep, and this is 5/8 inch socket. That's 1, 2. Check it again, just because it's your brakes. You want to be sure those don't fall off. So next on the instructions, I've already got the studs in. I'm doing the 4.5 by 5 forward pattern. Next we are going to be packing the larger bearing, which is the one that goes in the back. There, the smaller bearing fits under this nifty dust cap that you wouldn't even know was there, because it's machined so nicely. Anyway, and remember to use high temperature grease for wheel bearings with disc brakes. It's always good to spend as much money as you can. I think I normally do this with the other hand. So I'm packing it from the back to start, and then I will go around and pack it from the front, and I really didn't put enough grease on my hands. Let's take some of that excess there, and I'm just working it in the crack. And ideally what you want to do is get it so the grease going in from this side starts pushing the grease out the other side, because then you know you've packed it completely. Okay, we'll drop that in there. Now we're going to put the seal in. It goes like this. You can use a press, which mine's outside and has an issue right now, so we're not going to use that. A lot of times, the easy way is to just tap it in with a hammer. But sometimes, oh, this one's, no. Another trick that works is to just take some wood to protect the seal, be kind of a soft thing, and you can just whack it with a, I'm going to use a rubber mallet so it's doubly soft. There we go. So next, orient the rotor and the rotor adapter. So the directions come with a very nice exploded diagram, and you're going to want to refer to that and this picture here, which is a little dark, because what you want to be sure to do is you're getting this, and it needs to come in from this side. And then, but the bolts are going to go from this side. So we'll put this down, line that up, and we're going to be using these 6 bolts. You get 12 in the pack, 6 for one side, 6 for the other. And it is a T40 Torx bit if you want to torque it correctly. And the torque spec is going to be 25 foot-pounds with red Loctite. Now, the instructions warn you against using power tools on this. They don't want you wrecking it with an impact wrench. But this is a trick I picked up from some Formula Ford guys a long time ago. You just take a cordless drill and you change its kind of clutch setting down kind of low, and you use it just to get things, you know, going in snug before you actually torque them, and it's going to break away way before you know, you could possibly damage anything. The one thing is you generally want to start the bolts by hand just to be sure you don't cross thread them when you use the drill, and you know, start slow with the drill. You don't need to mash down on it. The directions call for an alternating sequence, which just means we will torque one side and then go across to the other side, and then switch back and work our way around, which you'll see. Alright, so I'm just going to cinch these down. Remember, this is not an impact, this is just a cordless drill. And okay. Now I'll set this to 25 pounds. I'd actually prefer to use a smaller torque wrench for something this low poundage, but due to extenuating circumstances, this is all we got. Okay, now we're going to put these two things on this. For this, we're going to use these bolts. We're going to use red Loctite again, but this time we're torquing to 45 pounds. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this all set up by hand, and then I'm going to put this in the wheel to tighten it the rest of the way. And these are a larger T45 Torx bit. And I'm going to do the same trick I did before. All right, now I'm going to put this in the wheel and we'll torque it in an alternating pattern again to 45 pounds. So I'm going to take this assembly and stick it in here. Now that would technically hold it. I suppose it could fall out, but I really don't want the threads of the studs gouging up the wheels, so I want to go ahead and put on the lug nuts. They're not tight, just, you know, finger tight. But that way the pressure's being spread out over the face of this nut, and the assembly can't fall out while I'm torquing on it, because, you know, accidents happen. All right, so now we're going to do these, and we'll do this a similar pattern to how we would torque the nuts on, the lug nuts on. One. All right. And I guess I should have covered this in some way when I had it resting on this, because it kind of scratches up the paint a little bit. Though, for my purposes, it gives it some nice patina, I guess. In case you're wondering, according to Wilwood, this O-ring here provides enough tension to keep this from spinning off when you're going 150 miles an hour. So we'll find out, you know. Last step on the bench is to pack the smaller wheel bearing, which is going to go in there. So now we can slide this on. There we go. All right, and then we've got our original castle nut. This isn't chess. And if you've never done wheels like this before on spindles, what we're going to do is a series of tightening this because we want to seat all the bearings and then loosening it so that, I don't want to have grease on my hands when I do this, so that when we spin this, it spins freely. Oddly, I have wrenches bigger than this and smaller than this, but I don't have a regular box end that's the right size. So okay, there I'm just kind of seating this, and you'll see now that takes some force to spin. But if I back it off, so you're trying to find that point where it's snug, and there's no play in it, but at the same time it spins freely. And then see. Then we've got to line up a hole for a cotter pin. Now I'd say that is too tight, so we're going to back it off one hole. Feels like it's got some play. No, it doesn't. It's good. Let me check it one more time. So that's too much friction. If you do that, it'll probably wear out your bearings faster. The first thing you'll notice is it'll heat up really hot. And so now it's nice and smooth, and we'll put cotter pin in. Okay, well that's not coming out, which means now spin this on. Get that nice and tight. Probably gonna need a clean rag to get the rest of this grease off, and when everything's said and done, we'll do brake cleaner on the disc brake itself, on the rotor that is. The next step is mounting the caliper itself, but the directions want to stop you at this point and make sure you know what you're doing before you do this, as if you've gotten this far, and remind you that you're supposed to be qualified and know what you're doing. For this next part, so this is going to go on there with 2 bolts. Now, they supply 2 bolts and they give you washers for each one, but they also give you a bunch of these shims. And the shims are going to go between the caliper and the bracket to get the caliper so that it's lined up this way and that way, and it's centered. You can see the seam in the caliper. You want that right in the middle of the rotor. And they suggest, I think, using 1 or 2 shims. You want to have the same, obviously, in both the upper and the lower, in the upper and the lower bolt hole. But I did, and so you start with 2, and you see where it is, and you take away shims or add shims until it's right. I did the other side, and I found it was 3 shims made it centered. So looking at the caliper, this is the surface that mates up against the bracket, and that's where you're going to want the shims. So I'm going to stick the bolt through to hold the shims. I'm going to put some red Loctite on because everything here uses red Loctite, and I'm going to put too much on for some reason. Then I'm going to take 3 shims, put those on there. I'll back this off so I can get it in. I'm going to try not to lose my shims while I do that. There we go. And I'm just going to thread this in a few threads so that it won't fall off, because I've got to do the lower one too. So for it, Go ahead and put my red Loctite on. And I'll just rotate this out, put the bolt in, take my 3 shims. All right. So it's a 9/16 socket and it needs to be torqued to 40 pounds. I'm just going to thread this in until it's finger tight on both sides. And we're going to verify that my shim count was right. But you can see we've got that right there, right in the middle of the rotor, which is what we're looking for. Which on yours is probably going to be different, and it might be 2 shims, might be 4 shims, might be 1 shim, might be no shims. So 40 foot-pounds. Do something I should have done to start with, which is I'm going to move the wheel out just against the steering rack. I get nervous about bolting things into aluminum when it's more than about 30 pounds. From bad experiences I've had. All right. So now we can put the brake pads in, and on these Wilwood setups, it is super easy. The only thing you really need to know is which side goes against the rotor, which it's the side with the pad on it. They just slide straight in, nice and easy, and there's a cotter pin that goes through to make sure they don't fall out. And you just put that in and bend it down and up so it can't fall out. And there you go. Pads are in. Now we just need to do the fitting. So the fitting's going to screw in right here, and they've put a nice little safety cover over it. It's a 1/8 27 MPT port. And they sell a 90-degree elbow fitting for it to a 3AN, which I've just wrapped the pipe tape on. They say to leave a couple threads clear, and of course you don't want pipe tape over that. And when you're looking at the hole, wrap the tape clockwise so that it doesn't unravel as you screw it in. I'm going to interrupt the video for a second to talk about the pipe tape that the directions say to use. I had problems with this once I got it all on and the fitting screwed in. I could tell when I was screwing them in they weren't going in as far as they should, and the pipe tape was just bunching up at the connection point. And then when everything was said and done and I bled everything, it leaked at the fittings. So then I noticed after the directions talk for like a paragraph on how to use the pipe tape, they say, or you can just use some thread sealant with PTFE. And they sell some high temperature stuff, which I guess I would recommend, although it's not like this stuff can take high temperature, so I'm not sure it matters. So I did this, and this is the kind of stuff that you actually see on the fittings that come on the calipers from the factory. So I don't know why they don't just say to use this. It's easier to use. Everything worked great first time. And then the 90-degree angle fittings I got was because that was what was recommended for a Mustang II setup. I was having a heck of a time getting them to be tight and end up in the orientation I want. So I found they have 45-degree, or actually these straight ones, which is hard to see with the glare. These straight ones would actually work better for me. I've got the brake line routed in a way that works right now, so it ain't broke, so I'm not fixing it, but I've got this. Should I have any problems, I'm going to redo it with these. Now, ideally, I'm going to end up with this pointed down, but no matter where I started it on that side, on the other side of the car, I couldn't get it to be at the right tightness and be pointed down. So we're just going to screw it in and see what happens. Now, it's pretty soft. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch open-end wrench to tighten it more. But be careful about marring the threads on it. Okay, I take it back. 7/16 fits much better. Okay, this is -3 AN line. Now with AN fittings, they don't need to be super tight. I mean, snug, obviously snug, but you don't bear down on them. The design is so that the pressure you create actually helps make the seal. I want to show one other thing, which is the kit comes with this steel spacer with a whole bunch of different bolt hole lug nut patterns. And what they say to use it for is if the mating surface of your wheel is bigger than the surface here, they say to use this, I think to stiffen the connection between the two. I checked my wheels on here. I've got aluminum wheels, and they do have a mating surface that goes quite a bit beyond here, but the old hubs were only about 2 millimeters more in diameter on the mating surface. So I thought that was kind of questionable whether or not I need this. Also, my car is only 1,900 pounds. There's only 800 pounds on the front axle, so there's not as much stress here as you would think. But I put this on and measured the distance from here to the caliper bolt as a reference. And with this on, I get the same distance that I got with the setup that I had originally. So I'm going to go ahead and use these. I guess it's safer, but it's going to put my wheels back in the same place they were. Some last minute details you should know. The swept volume of the master cylinders on the new brakes is larger than the swept volume on the brakes of what I had before, and of course it's got to be quite a bit different from a stock Mustang II setup. I'm using a 1 1/8 inch Wilwood master cylinder with it, which with the old brakes it was a little too firm. So with these brakes it feels really nice. I've actually got a 1-inch master cylinder for the front brakes on the other car, so whenever the day comes that I get to do this brake upgrade on that one, I'll see how it feels with the 1-inch master cylinder. But I know from this I can step that up to a 1 1/8 inch if I need to. And then another thing you should be aware of is changing the master cylinder size, changing the whole brake design and everything means you're going to have a different balance front to rear. So I had to adjust the brake bias quite a bit more forward because I had more pedal travel that is now travel that was going to the rear that wasn't going there before. And the first few times I tested the brakes, I got the back end to come around a little bit. But I gotta say I'm really happy with them. I didn't experience any fade on the track. I was getting up to about 112 and then coming down to 50 and then 110 down to 40. They felt great, and I'm not sure I've even got the brake bias quite dialed in yet. I just had them a little far forward so I wouldn't be caught off guard by the back end stepping out. But yeah, if you can get these, I highly recommend them. So remember that O-ring that's supposed to hold this cap in? Well, at least 112 it doesn't. This didn't come off at the track, but it loosened up to like there, and I've already wiped most of it off. It got grease everywhere, which, you know, your brakes are in there, so that's not great. Not that there should be that much grease in there anyways. So I think what I'm going to do is just put, you know, there's probably a Loctite product that's designed for something of this size. I'm just going to try putting a little dab of gasket maker in there or something, and then tighten this on pretty good. But I just wanted you to be aware of that if you're tracking this, the cap on the left-hand side anyways is a concern. On the other side of the car, the direction the tire's rotating is, you know, rotating it tighter.